Welcome to the round 4 means test, David King.
Morning, G. Another cracking weekend of footy. It felt like a long weekend, to be honest.
How long
my
ago
God.
does Brisbane's win over Collingwood feel?
And now they're asking for stuff for round 5. I say, can we finish round 4?
I've got a plane to catch to get to the next round in 4 hours' time.
Hey, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's going to
That'll
be excellent.
Terrific.
The means test is for Jamison. Win a limited edition Jamison Sharon match ball. Head to your local bottle shop to enter. Let's start with the King's Gambit, and Jeremy Cameron sits squarely in the King's Gambit. You were the first to declare him the best player in the competition quite some time ago.
Gee, he's been good, hasn't he, to start this season? So my opening question for you, who are the players that teams have to change their system or their game plan to curtail or stifle or give a player or their back six or their midfield an opportunity to compete and defeat? And Jeremy Cameron's right there. I was fascinated yesterday watching Sicily hold when he'd go more than 70, 80 metres from goal and try and pick him up on the way back. And there were times where he failed and there were times where he did it well. And he was just so good, Jeremy, doing what he does. In the end, it didn't work. Such is the form of this guy. Max Gawn's another one. How do you stop Max Gawn intercept marking long down the line? Well, we have to switch more. We have to take more risk with the ball. That brings other problems into play, but you can't just kick the ball long down the line to Max because you'll run aground. Jeremy McGovern has always been that player. If we just bomb the ball in long inside 50, no, you've got to lower your eyes. You got to pierce inside 50 rather than bomb. So there's probably half a dozen players in the comp, and everyone listening will have it in the back of their mind saying, well, that's Jake Lever for us, or that's what are we doing with the Dustin Martin role? Is it Dusty? Is it Shea Bolton? When they drift forward out of the centre bounce, how are we covering that? And if you don't, you bleed. So there's about I reckon 6 or 8 players in the comp max. Like, you don't really plan against Patrick Dangerfield, right? You can't stop him doing what he does at clearance. So you go head to head with your best clearance player or your clearance team. Just take on their clearance team. So that's not really what we mean. It's not a best player discussion. Yep. It's at what stage do you have to concede what you want to do to stop one player? It's a good discussion.
It is.
And Jeremy Cameron was the reason they were still in that game at halftime. It should have been a 4-goal gap.
Yes, if Hawthorn had been a little more experienced and had a little more poise and they'd been able to curb Cameron at all, it would have been a much bigger gap.
Yeah. Well,
it would have been 5-0 early, instead of 3-0.
They miss some easy ones, but that's part of getting the job done is converting your opportunity. So that's just bad play on Hawthorn's part. But I don't know too many players. I talked about Matt Rowell last week, what he did for the Suns to get them over the line against the Cats. It was a one-man war in there. And he's still young enough and still learning, so he hasn't been able to back that up. Jeremy's done it for I reckon the last 10 games of Jeremy Cameron have been special. The grand final, it wasn't special. He was just an also-ran in the grand final. They didn't need him to be special. Others picked up the slack. But his last, I must check it out with the guys who do the numbers, but I would say that his form over the last 12 to 15 games would be as good as any patch that we've seen of any individual.
So more broadly, what do you want to take out of yesterday?
Out of yesterday? Well, young teams generally lose. So I had a quick look. So the Hawks were clearly the youngest team they're going to be the youngest team every week for a little while, okay? And they're going to lose. So it's not the feedback and the pile on Sam is it's there, it's obvious, but you've got to temper it a little bit. So yesterday they had an average of 74 games per player, so basically 3 seasons, okay, of experience. Now that may be gathered over 6 years or 3 years or whatever, but each player had an average of 74 games. Geelong had 152, so it's a double. They're twice as experienced, and when they're the oldest team for the round. 152 games is seriously capable of getting the job done. So the 3 youngest teams for the round were Hawthorn, who played the oldest, so there's an alibi there. Gold Coast were the second youngest, but they played the Saints, who also had 8 players under 50 games, so there's no real alibi there. and Fremantle were the third youngest, but they had 7 under 50 games, but Adelaide also had, I think, 7 or 8 under 50 games. So there's no alibi there. So they're like for like. So then you just come down to your plan and your performance. But when you've got a young team, you get no chemistry. You're working with players who break down structurally because they can't concentrate for 2 hours, and they just have lapses, and they're not there. They're unsure of themselves. They're not sure where they belong at AFL level yet. They're a bit tentative. So you have all sorts of things go wrong. But we've talked a lot about the Saints this year. The Saints are a patched up team because of injury. We know that their best 22 is not there, or best 23 is not there at the moment, but they've still had 20 players play all 4 games. So that's at least they've had what they've had for 4 weeks. So they're sort of building a little bit of chemistry and that shared experience that we talk about. So at least there's that. So when you look at the other side of the coin, the seriously experienced team, they've got to be winning. They've got to be challenging for the flag. So the most experienced is Geelong coming off a flag, so no issues there. Collingwood are second. They sit 3-1. They played Brisbane, who are also seriously experienced. They are over 100 games per player. The Western Bulldogs are third, and the Tigers are fifth. So that was a good matchup.
Yep.
So that's just an indication of where you think you are on the premiership clock. If you're old and not in contention, you got a list problem. So this is why we keep coming back to knowing where you're at, making the correct trade and draft decisions in consultation or in concert, in line with where you're at on the premiership cycle. So that's the challenge. So you can make alibis for some teams, but when they're playing like types, those alibis are gone.
Yeah, so the Richmond Bulldogs discussion, which we'll get to, was such a good one. And how do we feel about both teams coming out of it? What of Geelong yesterday? The second half restored actually. That was the first sighting of their football. They were very good in round 1 against Collingwood, which got forgotten, but they didn't play in that manner. So at least they have their baseline now.
Yeah, and I'm happy to be a non-believer. Okay, so let's just take that off the table. I'm not going to be part of the Geelong wagon this year. I just won't be. I think I'm looking for signs of a decline, not reasons for success. So that's a negative approach to start with, right? So I'm happy to be that guy, right? And if Chris wants to put me in that camp, which he probably did after the game, well, that's okay too. We've got to have an opinion. You've got to put your flag in the ground somewhere, or we can meander and wax and wane all season. I still think a lot's going to fall on Patrick Dangerfield to do it again. And yesterday he was fantastic in that second half. He challenged Atkins and Guthrie and these guys to come with him. Mitch Duncan gave him some real security with the footy and just some know-how. I still think there's a few holes there. There's some vulnerabilities around the edges that maybe weren't there in a couple of seasons gone by, and they got this guy that's in unbelievable form. So if he can hold that, of course anything can happen. But you've got to compare it to the other 4 or 5 that are around the mark. There's a long way to go. I understand that injuries can play a part. They wouldn't want too many injuries, Geelong. They're already missing a few. Don't send them in. But I'm talking about the ace, king, and queen. If they were to lose one of those guys, you'll seriously see the depth issue. So, but it is good to see them play that sort of footy and to dominate contests like that. You don't see teams get bashed like that. But you've also got to factor in that Hawthorn are seriously young.
I think we'll get 2 dangerous tackles out of the game, is Gary Rowan and Will Day. One's a sling tackle and one's a dump tackle, so we'll wait to see how they get graded. The trigger point is the knee of Lloyd Meek into the ribs of Mark Blitzarves. Where sit you in that debate?
Yeah, I have no clue about Ruck.
Yes.
Right? I'm just going to declare that off the top, Jared. I think it's an awful position to have to play. I think to jump into someone at a centre bounce ruck contest would scare the life out of me, Jared. I don't know how they do it. But we've got to take a stance as a game to protect the longevity of these guys. We need them to be playing. We don't want to have we don't want to allow the system to injure players. So let's get it out of the game. So is it the point where I don't think you had to all of a sudden take a stance. I think the AFL have got to alert us, hey, we're now doing this. Don't just give someone a week on this one. I reckon you say, okay, Ruckman, be on notice. If we get to the point where we throw the ball up, this will get even worse because it'll be so predictable where the ball's likely to be a contest for the tap. So, yeah, we need to do something there.
We've shifted the terms of engagement in ruck contests periodically forever.
Yeah.
So this has always been a moving feast.
Do you understand ruck play? I've got no idea.
It looks really weird when you stand there and thrust your knee out when the ball's at the peak of it and jam it into the other bloke's ribs. And the AFL tried, so they got lost with the De Koning incident a couple of weeks ago where a free kick wasn't paid, then a fine was issued. It got rolled by the tribunal. They put out an edict going, hey, you can't do this.
Yeah.
And there it was yesterday. A free kick was paid and the advantage taken. So it didn't look like a free kick had been paid, but it had been.
Okay.
And the advantage was rushed off. So I would imagine that given De Koning got the fine, I think Meek will get the fine as well, but then they will argue that at the tribunal, having had the previous one get knocked off. So it'd be really interesting to see.
Just a bit of a waste of time, that one, isn't it? I think you do need to come out and say, hey, it's been a fine a couple of times. Now it'll be a week. Get your knees down.
Okay.
That's okay. I think we can work in real time with that one. The dump and sling tackles I have no sympathy for.
Nope.
You've got the arms pinned. As a player, you know exactly what you've got. You've got a vulnerable man that you can tip, turn, dump, slam, do whatever you like with. And if you choose to continue, I thought Day was a fraction unlucky that there was a bit of momentum going that way, but then there's the steer. There's the angle at the end is ugly for the player's head hitting the ground. So I have no sympathy for that one.
Yeah, and we have moved we are picking the action, not just the outcome. So let's see how
it's a good shift,
develops.
isn't it?
It is an important shift.
Yeah.
But it has been made, so we want that to back up week on week on week.
Is that who makes that shift? Is that just the MRO? Or?
No, I think that's the off-season discussion
Right.
between what the AFL wants, what they're asking their MRO to do, and the tribunal has been in lockstep with them so far.
Good move, Chriso, because we've bashed Chriso a couple of times. We need to give him a
He's going well.
little clap emoji
So
to
far
Chriso.
this year. All right. In our means test, the big issue is going to be Richmond. The debate will be Paddy McCartin's concussion, and the pressure index is clearly sitting on Justin Longmuir of the Dockers. Our means test for round 4 with David King. Will Matthew Nicks survive the rebuild? I suspect that's asked a little facetiously, but in there is the admiration for where Adelaide is reaching and what they might. They are a team that demands reassessment at the moment.
Yeah, my starting point is that coaches don't survive the rebuild. That's my overarching, and I reckon there's been about 4 examples out of 100 that have, and they're good examples. Guys like Hardwick, Clarkson, that have got there and done it. But there's those that have just been absorbed by the losses. In the end, the win-loss rates gets you. Just win, baby, is the old Al Davis. And if you don't just win, baby, then you're in strife. And Nixie's winning now. It probably, and I've been a fan of what he's been able to do with the ball movement and the ability to stop ball movement. I think their midfield is still 3 players short. They're still, in my opinion, 2 drafts away from becoming the finished model, and they've got to get those picks right. But what Rankin's done for this club is frightening. And I've said that one man's changed his football club, and it's all-consuming when you watch them play. What he's able to do in that forward half is just ridiculous. So will Nixie survive? I hope he does. And it looks now like he will.
Yeah, if you're winning in year 4, you're meeting the markers. The trouble is if you're not winning in year 5, you're not making it.
You got a good one. And you know what? The gap between a good one and a poor one is about $20 million a year.
Yeah, so
your business.
I'm going to put that into our curiosity.
Yeah.
The value of a coach who knows what he's doing from the first day that he arrives in the building. Now, means test from round 4. We sit on a Tuesday, and there's so much to work through. The big issue, Richmond, next. Matters are getting worse for Richmond. It looked like a decisive, narrow result against the Bulldogs. It felt like the tribunal was going to play a big hand in how their weeks ahead were going to be shaped, but it's injury that has intervened. Tom Lynch and now Toby Nankervis. I especially like this text, Kingy, from a loyal Crunch Time listener. Brian and Dramana, Kingy, I love your work, but at lunchtime, you told Jared he was wrong. The Dogs would win the clearances and the on-ball game. He was right, and you were wrong. Brian, thank you.
Did you text that in, Jared? Are you working under the name Brian today?
Richmond are our big issue on the means test.
Yeah. So the second quarter. So the second quarter is an outlier. It was an unbelievable quarter. Right?
Unbelievable.
It was as good a football as we've seen all year,
Yeah.
particularly in those conditions. So if you take that quarter out, we're gonna skew the numbers a little bit, right?
Yep.
Just to show the depth of the problem. So if you take the second quarter out, the Dogs win clearance 31-15, and that's a smashing. That you cannot compete against reasonable teams when they're going 2 to your 1 inside 50, 30 times to your. Clearance is 31 to 15. They're going inside 50, 42 times to your 23. So for 3 quarters, they go in 8 times a quarter. Like there's a disconnect. They're not. They've recruited clearance players and they're not winning clearance. So there's a bit of a. I think they're finding out. They're exploring what they've got, and there's a couple of players that may be paying a price for that. So Taranto goes in the midfield, so someone has to come out. So Dusty spends a lot more time forward. You've got Bolton still going in there, but not as regularly as he was last year. Cochin still goes in there. Baker's only going in there, in fits and starts. Last year they used Baker, they used Short, they used Bolton, they use Dusty when he's healthy. So maybe they have to go back to that. Maybe Taranto has to spend more time forward and finish his work in front of goal rather than try and be the kicker, which is he's not kicking the ball well at all, and win some contests forward of ball. So they won enough. They won enough contests outside the clearance on the weekend. They just didn't. Their ball movement's just not what it was. So they've got some problems. They've started the year really sluggish, and they've got some injuries now. So they've got the double whammy coming at them. I keep saying I'm holding faith with Richmond, and then you start looking at the numbers. You say, well, why? You start questioning yourself. What am I holding faith with Richmond? So right now they're underperforming for what they've got on hand, and I don't have great logic for it except for they're getting beaten too easy down back, but it's going in there too often to give them a chance to set. Is that fair?
Yes, as they don't have. So in their pomp, they had the defence to hold up. It didn't matter whether they won clearance or not. Is that defence is not going to hold up against getting dominated at the clearance, and they brought players in to try to rectify that. I'll give the one rider I give on the Taranto Hopper scenario is I reckon it takes at least half a season to properly integrate key pieces into your system, and I think they're going through the clanky stage on that at the moment. So I wouldn't. It's not that I think Taranto's a better player than Hopper. That was always my view. I think they've overpaid for Hopper. I think he's a grunt. I think Taranto can be better than that. But long term, they will be significant players in their midfield. I just don't think they're going to be that for the moment. And these injuries are big injuries.
Yeah.
Tom Lynch and Toby Nankervis, they're wretched injuries at a moment where they're about to hit Sydney and Melbourne.
Yeah, and again, it's not when you play. It's not who you play. It's when you play them. And just the concern for me is that they lack damage when you give them the footy now. You used to panic when you turn the ball over against Richmond. That's not quite there. And I don't know if that's player form or just the change in everyone's role and it's a little bit clunky, or the absence of some of those defenders. Because in the main, they're in reasonable order. They've been there the first month of footy. So they probably should have won round 1 on the numbers. They were lucky to get a draw in the end with the last couple of plays, but they probably should have won that game a bit earlier. So is the ladder a false read? I don't know. We really don't know for a little while. But they've got a challenge. They've got some correcting. I'm not jumping off, but I wouldn't be investing in them if they were a share right now.
Yep. On Crunch Time, you flagged how important a game it was for the Gold Coast Suns against St Kilda, and that unfolded on Saturday night. Stuart Dew lamented. So this is the worst bit, I think, the way the Suns performed.
Yeah, that was a seriously poor performance. I like the Suns I think they've got enough talent there to do some things. You've got some seriously good players. They've got more than 3 players, Jared. So my frustration is looking at that midfield, and every time I see the first bounce of a game or a quarter or first rotation into the midfield, I can tell you who's going in there. It's Rowell, Miller, Anderson. Every time. Now, I understand when you need to win a clearance, you throw your best in there. And maybe that's, for the opening bounce of the game, maybe that's spot on. But at some point, you've got to trust some other players to go through the middle, particularly when you're getting brained in the middle of the ground. Like, even for development of the next layer of player, you can't just have these guys take you for 150 games in a row being your prime starting midfield, because they get tired in game. They were spent halfway through the third quarter. St Kilda ran them into the ground, and they spun the midfielders through there. They threw blokes like Sinclair in there, who brought an energy. And he has to be in there for 20 minutes. But his running power challenges Miller to come with him, challenges Rowell to go. And then all of a sudden, through sheer fatigue, they break down at forward 50. Oh, their defensive 50, so St Kilda's forward 50 stoppages. And they give their direct opponent 3 metres, and they concede goals. So the goal it goes against Anderson. It goes against Miller. They didn't even pick up Jack Higgins when he walked in behind them on one occasion. So they actually can't think their way through and be a leader around stoppages or around structural moments because of sheer fatigue. Now, I'm not giving them an out. They're top-line AFL players. They've got to be able to handle that. But if you're wondering why they're getting beaten on the edges all the time, well, there's no trust there. So Stewie Jew's got a problem on his hands right now, is that he has to trust the full squad at a time where he needs a win. It's getting quite difficult. I'm a fan of Stewie. I've seen what he does. I've seen what he's trying to do with this group. It's clunky at the moment. They can't move the ball. There's absolutely no damage in their game at all. Absolutely none. You give them the ball, you don't panic. Their forward line still has too many guys who are non-competitors. And you cannot have tall guys who are non-competitors. Ben King's sadly out of form. I don't know what you do with Ben King. Dermot's been talking about that for a while.
Yes, he has.
So do you throw him to a wing? Do you throw him on ball? Do you say just go and run? Just go and get your hands, crash a few packs. Get your confidence back by crashing a few packs. But he's dropping a lot of marks. So bottom line is, to me, it's not necessarily the top line player, but they're a fair part of it. For losing on this given game. But he has to trust the next level of player down. Otherwise, this is a sinking ship.
And they have to rectify it really in the next 2 weeks.
Who have they got?
So they've got Fremantle, which is the early game on Friday.
That's
so
right.
there's the doubleheader there, which is sort of a perfect billing, really. And then they've got North Melbourne. So they're 1-3. Go out and beat Fremantle and then take care of business at home and square up at 3-3 and give yourselves a chance.
Yeah, well, Fremantle, that is a seriously winnable game.
Totally winnable game.
And at this stage of Stewie Jew's coaching tenure, this is a game they should stamp. And you can say the same about Longmuir, but we're talking about Stewie Jew at the moment, right? From inside out, hey, Fremantle are struggling here, and here. We're going after them. But I can't. If the best reads Miller, Rowell, and Anderson, then a gap, they're in trouble.
That's the worst bit, the Gold Coast Suns. The best bit was Port Adelaide's win for all that had been tied into the week for Kenny. For the week Port Adelaide had, with Warren Treadray's untenable comment by Thursday night, there was a report on one of the TV networks over there that there was a succession plan in place that had Josh Carr taking the job with Ken Hinkley when he finished up. That was all denied yesterday. So this was a result that meant so much, I suspect.
Jeez.
For the environment that's operating in Adelaide at the moment.
Yeah. You hear a lot of stories, don't you, in these sort of things. The bottom line is Ken needed to win this game.
Yeah.
And we all accept that. Ken knows the business. He's been around long enough to know exactly what needed to happen. They won the game, so I'm not talking down the win at all. But it's an ugly profile on paper.
Yes. And that's right. It plays out with two big comebacks.
Yeah.
Nowhere heading to half time and claw their way back.
In
and nowhere in the last quarter and claw their way in.
So John Longmire would feel disappointed in a couple of free kicks, particularly the Rampy one, I think, was really soft. You're entitled to take your own line at the footy and make contact like that. And I haven't heard the umpires clarify that, whether it's...
No, that in the wash of things, that won't get clarified.
Yeah, we should have an NBA style. Can we just get an answer on that one? Is that or isn't that? Just so we know going forward.
Yeah, I felt like the two in a row were unwarranted.
Yeah,
the one against Parker I don't think that gets picked up most of the time.
Clever from Rosie, though, wasn't it?
Yeah.
To lock the arm and then make out like Parker's holding you down. So that's tough. In live play, I can feel for the umpire on that one, but it doesn't help John Longmire today.
Nope.
So if Sydney keep playing like that, they'll stack more wins than losses. Doesn't help this morning. I get it, right? So they smacked them for inside 50s. It was 67 inside 50s. So the Sydney forward 50 is a discussion for the Swans, and we'll get to that in a minute. But Port got the win. No bluing there, but they're going to have to play a lot better than that week to week. Ken would know that. They got lucky late.
And the Swans, those two kicks that they took, Rampy and Heaney, to set up Florent, are nearly the two best kicks I've ever seen with a game in the balance. And it didn't result in the result that it might have.
Now, I didn't, because we had the world's longest round 4, I didn't see any of the review shows last night. But Ollie Wines would have been in for some severe feedback.
Yep.
If Florent kicks that goal.
Yep. I did see.
Was it on there?
I reckon maybe Kane might have done that on the
close
round
checking
so far.
round so far.
Yeah. I did see the.
Yeah.
I did see some vision.
I was just cheering for round 4 to finish. So that was a big error to make, and they come rushing forward. Port Adelaide, like they've got to practice their 2-minute drill stuff. That's what hit me pretty hard. They all rush forward to try and help Port Adelaide score. You don't need a score at that stage. You got to just hold up. So great game, one of the great games for the year so far. A twist with the finish. The premature celebrators, Jared, they were going crazy. The Ollie Florent and Stevens, but good for Ken, good for footy. We need Port in the hunt as deep as we can go.
That's the best bits. The debate comes out of that game. It is the Paddy McCartin scenario. We'll do that on the means test next. It's a distressing scenario. It's been debated with the appropriate gravity. I will say just in the judgments that are being cast there's an element of callousness that's attached to our footy conversation so far sometimes, but what matters most is how Paddy McCartin is as a starting point, and the rest becomes an academic debate, an absolutely vital academic debate. And it does feature discrepancies in the science and the recognition or otherwise of the cumulative impacts of multiple concussions. And the science and the medicine will shift over the next generation. And this will be a seminal case study, I think, not just in Australia, but internationally around a player in a contact sport with repeat concussions, how it looks graphically in an incident, and then what happens thereafter.
Yeah. So can we just take Paddy out of this for a moment?
Yeah.
And have the discussion without attaching the emotion to this family and this player. We wish him all the best, obviously. So, but let's not have a name to who we're going to talk about. So a player in this situation, there must be a template going forward that either allows that player to return to AFL football, or the code says, you know what, we are not taking you back into the system because we don't think this suits either party going forward. We're in court at the moment for a whole host of cases because we have tangible evidence of people struggling post-football across a whole host of players, probably 200 players. It's there. We know what we're talking about with those results. Now, you can find a thesis somewhere in the world that'll support either way. That'll support the return and it'll support the denial of the return. And any steps along the way regarding how long you sit out of the game, what measures and markers you need to hit, you can find anything to support any argument. So this is a difficult template to establish, but we have to have one. And if that arrives at player A not being able to come back into the code, then I think that's a healthy thing for our code. And we may lose a few players along the way, but I think we'll be better for it. And that's a difficult situation when that player is right in front of us, and we have to put a name to that player, and we have to tell him, hey, this code is not for you, or we're not prepared to take the risk. As a collision sport, we cannot guarantee this won't happen again. Therefore, we're not registering you to play.
Yeah. So there's going to have to be, I think, a level of independent oversight over if there's layers. If Paddy gets himself to a point where he's ready to return and the Swans think that's appropriate and their medical experts are prepared to tick off on that. There will have to be independent oversight, I think, now, and that'll be a groundbreaking moment. In a generation's
It'll
time,
be a template, won't it?
yeah, in a generation's time, I think all contact sport internationally will have a threshold on the number of concussions until a player is not able to return to contact sport. I think, and that's a challenging idea now, but it won't be in a generation's time.
Yeah.
So what does the science say? Is it 3 that Dr. Pearce speaks of? Is it more? What is it? But I think there'll be a mandated threshold that will take it'll take the uncertainty out of it, and it will end careers.
And rightly so.
Because we simply don't know from this vantage point what the cost of this is going to be in 30 years' time.
It's not unique to our code. We've got a guy called Kalen Ponga, who's one of the NRL's star players, who was concussed, I think, 4 times in 10 months, and he's sitting out the season. So this is not a rare event. It's quite common now in world sport to be assessing concussions and the likelihood of continuance in the sport. So, yeah, difficult for the McCartin family and for Paddy and for the Sydney Swans and how they handle all of this in the AFL. But we have to have a template. We can't be – and everyone says, but every case is different. I understand the individual cases are different, but we have to have a template that protects the AFL as a body, both financially and we have to be looking after the player.
Yeah, so the one bit that makes me bristle in all of this is that there'd be any serious countenance in the idea that Paddy McCartin signs a waiver so that we could somehow all absolve ourselves of responsibility for this. So this is his choice. No. Is that it's an awful suggestion. I understand how it gets made, but that's not the answer. There's a collective responsibility in all of this from those who govern the game, those who watch the game. But the idea of cutting off Paddy McCartin and just go, you fend for yourself for the rest of your life. No, we can't be party to that. That's not even vaguely a solution here.
No. And I don't know if a waiver like that would exist anyway.
I don't think it would hold any legal weight.
No.
But just the idea of we all absolve ourselves of it. No. This is a collective responsibility that contact sport will grapple with for the next 20 years, and it'll find its next level. Remember, 15 years ago, players were going back out on the ground. Where are we 15 years on, and where will we be in 15 years' time?
And I think just while we're on this topic, a lot of people are seeing this as just a cash transaction. Oh, this player's suing this person or the AFL or the club. That'll be $2 million. It's not about the money. Their lives are in turmoil. These young men, I call them young, they're 40, 50 years of age, some even younger. You know, their behaviour has changed to the point where they're no longer themselves. So this is not transactional. So just we've got to have a bit of empathy for the situation. It's not, he's just doing that for money. These guys are going through hell. So I think we've just got to put that on the table as well for those that are already finding their way to court and are already in this situation. They need help, not money, just help.
The debate is a grave one in these circumstances on our means test after round 4. We'll do the pressure index, Justin Longmuir and his Dockers, after Nathan in the newsroom. So, Kingy, is the Kalen Ponga story. Is Night Star Kalen Ponga has said his recent trip to Canada for neurological testing has proven reassuring as he readies himself for a return to action.
Well, at the start of the year, they were talking about him being out for the season and he was going to make a call whether he retired or not coming back from Canada. So that's news to me, so I appreciate the text coming in. I can't believe he'd be back for around 8 or 10. That's frightening.
And this is the challenge in the science right now, which will develop over the next generation, is this. He's gone to Canada. He's got reassuring results. I'm good. 4 weeks ago, there was talk about retirement. We got the best results I could over there. I got cleared on the brain perspective and that you're able to go back and play. So he's found the clearance through Canadian studies, which will be absolutely disputed by some who are running the science here. I think there's this notion that we've reached a point where there's a chord. There's no accord. There's not a chord over CTE. There's not a chord over the cumulative effect of concussions. There will be, but that'll be another generation down the track.
I'll track this guy to within an inch of his life. I love me in NRL. That's news to me. That must be recent news. So I appreciate the text coming through, so we'll correct that in a hurry.
The pressure index has sat on Fremantle really right through the first 4 weeks of the season. Their only result is a win over West Coast, who are incredibly depleted within a game. What do they want to be? To be watching that game and then to hear him at halftime and go, okay, so this is not what you're after. And then really I didn't see anything discernibly different outside of the West Coast game, which I think there are mitigating factors. Is they have looked, I think, the same way in the 3 games they've lost.
The bottom line is that where they invest their energies, where they invest their system, if you like. So they want to play the game in control, right? So fundamentally for me, that's a poor starting point. You've got to give the keys to the players. The game's a chaotic game. It's a game of errors. Each team makes about 70 turnovers a game, right? So 140. There's 140 turnovers in 120 minutes. So you got to live with error. You can't coach perfection. You can't coach control. Embrace imperfection, or you end up overcoaching. Do this, do that. Don't do this. Don't do that. Be careful when you're in this situation. Let's do this. Doesn't work like that. It's the game now is a ground ball game. So our ball on the deck, it doesn't bounce true. It's all over the place. So you've got to find a way, and we'll get to the Collingwood discussion later. You've got to find a way to outnumber where you invest your energy, right? So if you're going to be a corridor running gun team, well, you want a wave run. You want 3 or 4 guys linking up. So how do you get those 4 or 5 guys? All right, the halfbacks have got to be involved, so you've got to be here, you've got to be proactive. They get hammered at ground level. Excuse me. They get hammered at ground level. So when the ball leaves a clearance and it goes to a contest, inevitably there's a spoil and it spills. It's almost like a crumb. Everywhere around the ground is a crumb situation. They're minus 27 on the weekend, minus 20 the week before, plus 14 against the Kangaroos and minus 4 against in round 1. They're bad numbers. They're bad numbers. So they've got to correct that. But it doesn't just correct by asking for more from your players. Your system has to allow you to outnumber or put your elite talent where the contest has to be won. Now, at the start of the season, their best clearance and contest beast is kept inside the cage, inside the forward 50. He's not allowed to leave there and be part of that contest game. So why would that correct? And then you have a system that plays in control, and as soon as Adelaide say, well, we're not giving the uncontested marks. I think they only took like 65 marks or something because they wouldn't let them chip it around. They have to kick the contest, which brings a spoil, which brings a ground ball, and then they're outnumbered because all their players have fanned for the uncontested kick game, the uncontested mark game. So the way they're playing, it's not hand in glove. So as soon as it becomes a loose ball, the game goes into live play. It's at speed. So the ball's coming back at speed. Where are your defenders? They're all spread for the uncontested mark. So you bleed easy scores going back the other way because you got to pick up 30 metres every time you turn the ball over. So it doesn't work. I've been strong on this for 18 months with this footy club. And if they continue down this path, it'll be the death of them. So change the plan. If that's not how it should look, well, show us how it should look. If you can't change it, that's on the coaches. And if you won't change it, that's on the coaches. So embrace that this is your lot and either get this other side right. If you're going to play different, great. We love different. But it's got to work. It's no good just being different.
Yes.
It has to prove the reason why you win games. So they are uninspiring to watch. I would hate to play under this system. And I think it's bashed players with flair. It's made them drones. And they don't have the damage they had only 18 months ago. They played some pretty good footy at the start of last year. They did. So how do they get that back is the big challenge. And to get that back, the coach has got to give the keys to the players and say, hey, how do we need to do this? I trust you to make the right decisions. If you make the wrong ones, well, we've got coverage. It's no good having a good defensive number and saying, oh, but we only concede 65 points a week. When you're protecting the numbers with the ball, it's fake footy. It's a false profile to look at points against. You've got to look at how your back six stack up when they're under contest, when the ball's coming at them. And to me, that's his greatest challenge right now. It's the same as Stewie Jew. Stewie's got to trust the next wave of player. Justin has to trust that this group will make errors and they'll be able to live with them.
That's the place in the pressure index for Fremantle. Fair warning here from Dan in Torquay. If you blokes don't talk about the Bombers this morning, I am deleting the SEN app and moving to RSN.
We're going to talk Bombers, aren't we?
Well, they're not in any of the categories.
Hey, I'm talking about Jake Stringer when we get back.
All right, Dan, stay there.
Dan, I'm with you, Dan.
Just a rogue category coming up.
Yes.
I look forward to hearing how you label that, David.
Jake Stringer.
Oh, hang on. Just Dan's text was then countered by, if you talk about the Bombers, I'll be deleting the app, which is why we don't program via the 40 Wings temper text, as much fun as it is.
All right. Turn the radio down for 12 seconds. I just want to get this out and then turn us back on. What a game. 15 touches. He was everywhere. 4 goals, 6. It's the best game he's played in some time. 12 contested possessions. When Jake Stringer is in that mood, everyone on the ground feels it. It's a bit like when the ball goes near Dustin Martin for Richmond of last year before, when he was up and rolling. The whole crowd hold their breath and they get involved. Jake has that same buzz about him. Yep. And I know he looks different to other star factor players, but what he does is so game breaking. It's awesome. So I just wanted to give him a little shout out. He gets bashed more often than not, but I love Jake Stringer, the player. He's a beauty.
Okay. To our more established categories. Actually, can I tell you about MC Hammer? So Benji and I have been doing the catalogue of Marvel movies. We've been watching the Thor movies, and he says to me just randomly one day, "Dad, what's your favourite hammer?" And I said, "MC Hammer." I said, "Go and look it up on Spotify." And so we round the house.
That's child abuse.
Can't touch this.
What are you doing with those kids?
The curiosity. So the value of a great coach, a coach that has the experience, has the scar tissue, knows how to build a program from day one. So I think there's an element of Ross Lyons making a few look silly at the moment with what he's been able to build in such a short period of time. And it's not the iron conversation. They're not about to win the flag this year, but this has now moved out of the condescending pat on the head. You guys are doing really well here. Well done. Is it moved out of that category for me on Saturday night as they ran up 17 goals and completely dismantled an opposition who have been trying to build something for years?
Well, they're actually great to watch. Actually, the way they run and support is awesome. You if you're a Saints fan, you're proud of your team, and that's all you're asking for. We want Ross to make us proud again, that we can go to the footy and have a level of surety on what we're going to see and what we're going to get from our troops. So right now, they're the hardest team to score against, and they're the hardest team to move the ball against. That is Ross Lyon 101. And then he brings all these other coaches in that sort of offer their little bits and pieces in how they want to move the ball, how they want to play, how they want to do this, how they want to do that. So that they are huge ticks. Okay, so they win the ball back in the middle of the ground more than anyone. I think they're second. So I shouldn't say more than anyone. They're second. And then their ability to play going the other way. Only Sydney move the ball better from coast to coast, D50 to inside 50. So you can't move it against them, and they can move it against you.
Yep.
It's a great position to be in. That was the Sydney Swans last year. So that's the level it can get to. Forget the names. Forget the names. Other names will come back, and they'll be able to impact the scoreboard more readily when King's there, when Jones is breaking out of the middle, go through all the names. They're going to make them better in terms of individuals doing spark plays, acts of brilliance. So if you're already moving the ball the best in the comp and you're already defending the ball movement the best in the comp, you've got massive scope. I didn't think St Kilda would be here as quickly as they are, and there'll be better opposition coming. So we've got to temper it a fraction. But how proud are you right now as a St Kilda fan?
So my long-term view, the most important person at a footy club is the senior coach. And my long-term view is that the senior coach's wage should be removed from the soft cap because they are not getting paid to the measure of their importance to their club. The most highly paid employee of every club should be the senior coach.
Yeah.
Because I think everything hangs on whether they're any good at it or not.
Well, the gap at the Kangaroos between last year David Noble and then the club, the flow and effect, attendances, sponsors, player retention, there's a cost to that if you start losing players. The ability to attract players to your club. So that there's a cost in that if you can't get those guys. So right now, under Alistair Clarkson, I'd say the gap between the two would be north of 15 million. What Alistair Clarkson's worth to the Kangaroos this year with sponsorship and attendance is a tenth of what he's getting paid. He's going to on $1 million a year. He would be worth what to the football club? I mean, he's working at the AFL. He'd have all sorts of triggers.
Yes,
all sorts of triggers.
Yep.
And he would be earning 3 times as much as what he's getting. So the gap between a good one and a bad one to the business is just incredible. So you got to get these decisions right. And if you think you got the wrong man, Jared, get him out and get one in.
Couple of what they got wrongs, or they got that wrong. So I think the grading on the Harry McKay report is wrong, and it's going to get tested at the tribunal tonight. Quite obviously, Carlton are going. They'll try to get medium downgraded to low. I think they should be successful on that. This doesn't fall into the potential to cause injury for me. That's about bumps and dump tackles and sling tackles, not a stray forearm, which is absolutely worthy of a fine, but not worthy of a suspension.
Yeah, no, I don't agree.
Okay, you're going to have him missing Thursday night?
Yeah, I'm not worried about him missing a game, but I want to see him play, Jared. And I don't think it's a malicious act by any stretch. But what are you doing? Like, what have you been watching for 2 years? We've been trying to stamp this out for a long time, and this is the only year we got serious. So what are you doing? So cop your week. Stand strong and say, no, we're not watering it down to a fine. And I shouldn't have done it last time.
With Charlie Ballard.
If you throw an elbow or a forearms, what positive can happen from that?
All right, so we're going to see that one differently, but
he'll get reduced, and we'll weaken our stance again.
Yeah, I don't think this would weaken the stance. I think this is just an odd one. And the positioning of the boundary umpire yesterday he's 4 metres inside the boundary.
Before you leave the report, if it's looks like a reportable offence, can it be a free kick and 50-metre penalty that day in that game, please?
No, we had that.
I want that back.
And we threw that out. We didn't like
back.
it. The position of the boundary umpire, get out of the way. You're
What was
supposed
he
to be
doing?
on the boundary line or the other side of the boundary line. Anyway, the means test for Jamison.
Or put on some size.
Seedings. My seedings are in rude health. I'm so happy with my seedings.
I'm not happy with
holding. You've got work to do.
I got not enough teams in my 4, Jared. That's my problem. I'll tell you what, I'm going to mix it up this week.
All right.
I'm doing it in order of teams that I wouldn't want to play this week. That's my theory.
Yeah, that's okay.
You happy with that?
Yeah.
At 4,
go on.
I've got the Adelaide Crows.
Oh, nice.
I think they're playing some seriously good footy, and I know that maybe they're not at the pointy end of the discussion for most, but I'm a big fan.
I put St Kilda into my settings last week. I'm on good terms with myself there. They stay at 4.
Yeah, I couldn't find a spot for them. At 3, I've gone Carlton.
Yeah, I've got Carlton at 3. Welcome aboard.
Yeah. I knew you.
I've been holding a candle for weeks.
You.
They've got 8 of their 20 points.
Yeah, there you go. 8 of their 20.
Yeah, Thursday's a big night.
It was a rough start for you. A bit nervous last week. So Adelaide and Carlton this week will be a cracker.
Yeah, they're 3 and 4. I
Yeah.
love that idea. You could have had them 4 and 5 as a play-in game.
No.
But I like 3 and 4.
Yeah, you didn't tell me about that during the break, did you?
2.
2 Melbourne. And
2 Collingwood.
Yeah, and Collingwood 1. There's a big
Melbourne
gap between
1.
1 and 2 and the rest, but St Kilda and Brisbane unlucky, but Carlton's and Adelaide this week.
It's connoisseur's choice 1 and 2 at the moment as to which order you have them in. So the Melbourne, we've had Melbourne correspondence. Why not us this week? Well, you just did the business this week. So you retain the number 1 seed for me, stay at 2 for Kingy, but they just did the business against.
If you like violence, you'll like Melbourne, and if you're a dancer, you'll like Collingwood.
I did. So we didn't get to PFI. I do want to direct you to Crunch Time. We did a proper PFI on Collingwood. Dermot Brereton and David King on opposite sides of it. It went for about 15 minutes and went right through an ad break.
Yeah, well, the core of the discussion was the 10 goals in a row.
Yep.
I texted him yesterday. Should Hawthorn go to plan B?
Very good.